So the Las Vegas Raiders have a big game coming up against the New Orleans Saints, and there's a lot of updates coming out of that game. Plus, we've been hearing a lot of reports about Antonio Pierce. Some people talking about Mike Vrabel as well as the Raiders' potential next head coach. There's an interesting rumor around that we'll kind of get into a little bit later on. Plus, Brock Bowers is about to make history, and we'll kind of finish this video talking about him a little bit. But let's just get right into the injury report. So Derek Carr, former Las Vegas Raiders quarterback, currently with the New Orleans Saints. This was the game that a lot of people were talking about. About 2 years ago when the Raiders first moved off of Derek, we knew that we would play the Saints the following year. And the NFL made it happen towards the end of the season, right? This game could have meant a lot had the Raiders and the Saints been in contention for the playoffs. Both teams could have potentially been in contention for the playoffs. Both teams, this could have been a massive game, right? Maybe the Saints are 1 or 2 games out and now Derek Carr plays his former team. Or vice versa, maybe the Raiders are 1 or 2 games out, and Derek Carr has a chance to ruin that for the Las Vegas Raiders. Regardless of that, both teams suck. Both teams aren't making the playoffs, and Derek Carr is going to be out for the Raiders. Now, this does actually impact the Raiders a little bit. The New Orleans Saints' best team right now would be with Derek Carr leading that offense. Alvin Kamara is also going to be out of this game, as is their starting guard and center, and Eric McCoy, as well as Lucas Patrick. All 4 of those guys are going to be out for this game, and it does technically still impact the Raiders because obviously for the Raiders, you don't want to win any games at this point, right? Let's just be honest. For the Raiders, best case scenario starting last week would have been to lose out these final 3 games, but we're going into a game against the Saints that the Raiders have a realistic shot to end up winning. And the reason why this matters is obviously going to come down to the draft stock for the Las Vegas Raiders. So the Raiders obviously beat the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. So what ended up happening was the Raiders go from the number 1 pick down to the number 6 pick. And if the Raiders actually beat the Saints, we end up going from 6 all the way down to 9. So the Raiders, just over 2 weeks, have essentially dropped from 1 to 9. If they win this game against the Saints, they'll end up dropping down to 9. That is, that's like the worst case scenario if you're a Raiders fan, right? For the Raiders to go from 1 down to 9, essentially. Now, it doesn't mean the Raiders can't get a quarterback with the 9th overall pick. In truth be told, we're probably not going to have the 9th overall pick, even if we win, because the Jags and Titans play this week, plus we still have 2 full weeks left, which means any of these teams can end up winning in the last couple of weeks. So we don't really know where the Raiders will pick, but there's probably 3 or 4 quarterbacks that'll end up going in the top 10 to 15 picks. So the Raiders could still technically get a quarterback. So it's not the end of the world, right? The Raiders winning or losing or whatever it is, but the Saints will have, they'll essentially be with a rookie quarterback starting this week. They'll be without Derek Carr. They'll be without their starting running back. The Raiders, on the other hand, will also be out Jordan Meredith, who is our starting guard. Jackson Powers-Johnson's going to be good to go. He'll replace Jordan Meredith at left guard. Honor James will once again start at center. And for the most part, the Raiders are fairly healthy, right? They should be good to go coming into this week. It's going to be an interesting matchup, man. I'm excited to watch some of the younger guys. DJ Glaze is going to have his hands full with a couple of good pass rushers that the Saints have. At the same time, the Saints still have a pretty good defense, so we can continue to evaluate Aiden O'Connell, and I know people are out on Aiden, but I still want to see what this guy can do. Scott Turner is another guy. Although he's improved the offense, we're not scoring a lot more points, right? So, although the season's not over, and although we're not going to make the playoffs, and any win does ruin our draft position, we can still evaluate this team and really figure out who should be here next year and who shouldn't be. Clavon Chasen has broken out for us a little bit. Andre Carter, I think, played like 1 or 2 snaps this past game. Not that he did anything crazy, but he looked kind of good out there, right? So he's another guy I want to kind of watch this week. I think he'll play a little bit more for the Raiders coming up. He's wearing number 99, which is Cleveland Farrell's old number. He looked good out there. So I want to kind of see what he can do. He looked good out with the Vikings, right? But I want to see what he can do with the Raiders. So we'll see how it kind of plays out. Now let's go ahead and switch focus a little bit. We got a very interesting report that's coming out from Deanna Rossini, who was an NFL insider. She previously was an insider with ESPN. She now works with The Athletic. And she is putting it out there that sources around the league believe that this is probably going to be it for Las Vegas Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce. Essentially implying that Antonio Pierce is likely to be fired after these next 2 weeks. Now, it's interesting because, Antonio Pierce answered the question the way he answered it when asked about the number 1 overall pick. He kind of threw it out there, go ask Tom Telesco about that. It's essentially his job. And it's interesting because a lot of people do think Antonio Pierce is going to be fired. And I honestly think, based off of Mark Davis's words that he put out maybe like in the last month or so, whenever it was at the owners' meeting, I think there's a real chance the Raiders also move off of Antonio Pierce. And I think it makes sense to move off of Antonio Pierce. I think the Raiders have to value your head coach has to be a guy that calls plays. I think it's such an important part of being able to have success. And I'm not saying that's the only way you can have success, but you look at the best teams in the NFL right now. The teams with the best offenses are winning football games, right? And I think for the Raiders, if you want to have success, you got to get that guy that can actually run an entire offense. Because if that guy's your coach for 6-7 years, specifically if he's your head coach, he'll be here for 6-7 years, right? He'll continue to be your coach. He'll continue to call plays. There's a report about Mike Vrabel potentially coming to the Raiders. This one comes from a different person. He said that he thinks Vrabel is heading to the Raiders. That's what he's hearing around the league. People think Mike Vrabel's coming to the Raiders. Now, of course, Mike Vrabel also is connected to Tom Brady, right? They're former teammates. They've known each other for a number of years. And some people think with Tom Brady now being a minority owner with the Las Vegas Raiders, that this could also kind of make sense, right? You bring in a guy like Mike Vrabel, you fire Antonio Pierce, who was kind of inexperienced, right, when he took over the job. Although he's done a good job in the first year, the second year hasn't been as good. Some people are saying you go out and get Mike Vrabel. It makes sense, and I'll be the first to tell you guys, I don't hate Mike Vrabel as a head coach. He's had success, but if you guys just follow the trends, Mike Vrabel's success relied on those offensive coordinators, right? It's the same exact way that Antonio Pierce essentially failed this year because of the offensive coordinator he hired, right? Hiring Luke Getsy was arguably the biggest reason the Raiders did not win games this year. And I think with Mike Vrabel, you can kind of, take the 6 years he was with the Titans and kind of apply that same math, right? So, first and foremost, the Tennessee Titans, the 2 previous years to Mike Vrabel getting there were both, they're 9-7 in those 2 years. Mike Vrabel's first 2 years with the Titans, they also went 9-7. Now, one of the interesting things with the Titans in those 2 years is the first year, their offensive coordinator, right, the guy that Mike Vrabel put in charge to run the entire offense was Matt LaFleur, who is currently the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. We understand he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. The Titans had a pretty good offense that year. I think they ranked like 15th in points. So they're a really good offense in that first year with Mike Vrabel. They ended up going 9-7. Keep in mind, right, they started to like revive that Ryan Tannehill and try to kind of build and get back to form. And Matt LaFleur obviously ended up taking a job with the Green Bay Packers. And then Mike Vrabel replaced Matt LaFleur with Arthur Smith. And Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator for the Titans for 2 years. In those 2 years, they had top 10 offense in both of those years. The first year they went 9-7, right? So Vrabel's first 2 years. The first year was with Matt LaFleur. The second year was Arthur Smith, and then the third year they ended up winning 11 games that year, and they made the playoffs. They went all the way to the AFC Championship game. That was with Arthur Smith as their offensive coordinator, and then Arthur Smith actually took that job with the Atlanta Falcons. I believe that was 2021, and then Mike Vrabel had to now hire his third offensive coordinator, and in that instance, he hired Todd Downing. And that was kind of the end for Mike Vrabel, right? Because although they went 12-5 that very next year, the offense dipped. I think it was like the 15th best offense, right? So you went from having a top 10 offense back-to-back years to now the offense is starting to dip a little bit under Todd Downing. And then the fifth year Mike Vrabel was the head coach of the Titans. They once again had Todd Downing, and they had a bottom 10 offense. The following year, he fires Todd Downing, hires a different offense coordinator, and he's fired in the middle of the season, right? So, to me, Mike Vrabel's success will always rely on those offensive coordinators, the same way Antonio Pierce's success would as well. If the Raiders had hired Matt LaFleur after LaFleur's first season with the Tennessee Titans, the Raiders would be legit right now, right? At least on in the coaching aspect of things. You go even previous to that. Had they hired Kyle Shanahan, had they hired Sean McVay, had they hired a good offensive coordinator that can continue to run an offense, the Raiders would have success, right? And specifically hiring those guys as your head coach, because that's where you're going to have the most success. When you put those guys as your head coach, they're not going to ever leave. But we've seen with Mike Vrabel and even with Antonio Pierce unable to hire a good offensive coordinator, your job's going to be relied upon these guys. And I'm going to make a prediction to you guys right now. I think there's a real chance that even when you look at a guy like Dan Campbell, what he was able to do with Ben Johnson these past couple of years, that's not going to be replicated next year. It's almost impossible that Dan Campbell will have that same success going forward. Right? Ben Johnson's run one of the best offenses in the NFL, and that offense has kind of carried the Detroit Lions over the past couple of years. And I truly, truly think that within the next 2 years, Dan Campbell's likely going to be fired unless he finds another Ben Johnson caliber coach. We'll see if that actually ends up happening, right? Would I be out on Mike Vrabel? I'm not 100% out. I would, if it's between AP and Vrabel, sure, I would take Vrabel, right? He's had success. He's proven himself. But I don't think it's the right way to hire I don't think it's the right way to hire head coaches. Got to go the offensive coordinator route. It's the best way to have success. Plus, you can also get a guy that can develop a quarterback because that's probably where the Raiders are headed. Finally, let's wrap this up with some interesting news, specifically regarding the Las Vegas Raiders rookie tight end Brock Bowers. He's apparently about to break a couple of NFL records, and this is kind of interesting because one of those records has held since for over 60 years, right? The great Mike Ditka set a record in 1961 when he caught 56 passes for 1,076 yards as a rookie with the Chicago Bears. And no one has approached that record. That is specifically the yards. No tight end has gotten close to the 1,076 yards that Mike Ditka has essentially set for tight ends. And Bowers is 10 yards away from breaking that record. So as long as Bowers plays the next 2 weeks, he will break that record. There's also another record that Brock Bowers is going to end up breaking, and that's going to be the catch record for all-time rookies, which this one's kind of crazy because tight ends aren't generally catching 100-plus passes. But Puka Nacua set the rookie record this past year where he caught 105 catches, right? Last year specifically. Puka Nacua caught 105 catches, and Brock Bowers is literally right there as well. He's 5 catches away from breaking that record. So Brock Bowers is about to set 2 records in his rookie season, which is absolutely crazy. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'll be the first to be 100% honest with you guys. When the Raiders brought in Brock Bowers, I said, I don't think it makes sense to draft the tight end because of the fact that tight ends don't generally pan out right away. Right? It just takes them 1 or 2 years to really develop. And Brock Bowers is different, man. It's not even just develop. Like, this guy's legit. And you can already tell this guy's legit. To be 100% honest, guys, if Brock Bowers was like a slot wide receiver, if he just played wide receiver full time, he would legit still be one of the best wide receivers. Like, he's such a great football player. But the fact this guy can not only catch passes, he makes people miss. He breaks tackles. He runs through people. Like, he's just hard to tackle. He's hard to bring down. And it's just different, right? The way Brock Bowers is, it's absolutely different. I don't think we've seen a tight end in the NFL ever the way Brock Bowers is, just because of the fact that he breaks tackles. Most tight ends don't break tackles. Darren Waller is an example of a guy that's like, he runs good routes. He's tall. He's long. He's athletic. He can make plays with the ball, but he didn't break tackles the way Brock Bowers does. And truth be told, like, I don't know if there's any other tight end in the NFL even now. Like, I don't even know if George Kittle breaks those type of tackles the way Brock Bowers does, right? So, I'm happy that the Raiders brought this guy in. It was obviously a really solid pick. Brock Bowers should end up going down as a generational tight end, and a generational player, just generally speaking. So, hopefully he breaks that record in this next game, right? He needs 5 catches, and I think he'll 6 yards. So, he's right there. He'll probably end up breaking both of those records this upcoming game. Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below with the game coming up with Antonio Pierce, Brock Bowers. Let me know your thoughts and opinions, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.